Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants, to this session of the textual study of the Quran. This textual study, as you know, is based on Ustaz Ghamidi's Al-Bayan, and we normally take his translation in this study and try to understand the way he has presented his exegesis on the Quran, and at the same time highlighting how the Farai school approaches the study and comprehension of the Quran and the way it is presented. Today we are going to move forward with the next section. We are going to study verses 63 to 82. If you recall, from verse 40, the Israelites have been addressed, who are primarily the real addressees of this surah. They are presented with their charge sheet. They are being told that for so many years, 2,000 years, prophets have been coming to them. In fact, for a very long time, the situation was that one prophet came right after the other, and as the Quran says, وَقَفَّيْنَا مِن بَعْدِهِ بِالرُّسُولِ, which means that they were sent one after the other, and in spite of this tremendous arrangement by the Almighty, they ended up on a number of occasions in disobeying the directives of the Almighty. So verses 63 to 82 are the ones that we are going through today, and you'll find that in these verses as well, the charge sheet which is presented against them is continuing from the previous verses, and once again we find that the Israelites are at the wrong end. They are the receiving end of this charge sheet, and they are being told that look how you broke your promises and breached your covenants, and even after some of the remedial measures, the Almighty forgave you and gave you more chance, further opportunity, but they squandered this opportunity time and again. So let us read the first four verses, so that we'll first go through the translation, and then inshallah we'll see some of the tafsir issues which relate to these four verses. So I'm going to start off this section with verse 63. وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَكُمْ وَرَفَعْنَا فَوْقَكُمُ الطُّورَ خُذُوا مَا آتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ وَاذْكُرُوا مَا فِيهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ ثم توليتم من بعد ذلك فلولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته لكنتم من الخاسرين ولقد علمتم الذين اعتدوا منكم في السبت فقلنا لهم كونوا قردة خاسئين فجعلناها نكالا لما بين يديها وما خلفها وموعظة للمتقين. And recall when we made a covenant with you, and for this had raised Mount Sinai above you, and had said, grasp strongly what we have given you, and keep in mind whatever is written in it, so that you may remain secure from the wrath of God. Yet even after this, you turned away from it. So in reality, had it not been for God's grace and mercy on you, you would have surely been in great loss owing to this attitude of yours. And you know of those among you who violated the sanctity of the Sabbath. So we said to them, go and become detested monkeys. So in this way we made that city of theirs in which they violated the Sabbath an example for those around it, and a means of counsel to the God-fearing. So as you can see that this is once again one section of the history of the Israelites, and the first verse which refers to it is that covenant which was made on Mount of Sinai, and actually it was raised. The covenant was made in the valley which faced Mount Sinai, and this particular topic has been discussed in more detail in Surah Araf, in which it is stated that as the verse says, وَإِذْ نَتَقْنَا الْجَبَلَ فَوْقَهُمْ كَأَنَّهُ الظُّلَّ وَظَنُّوا أَنَّهُمْ وَاقِعٌ بِهِمْ خُذُوا مَا آتَيْنَاكُمْ بِقُوَّةٍ وَاذْكُرُوا مَا فِيهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, these are verses 170 and 171 of Surah Araf, and they in fact explain what had happened. That as these verses say, that we had lifted the mountain and suspended over them, and it got suspended from above them as if it were a canopy. So the words are كَأَنَّهُ ظُلَّ, and they were thinking that it was about to fall on them. So God said, hold fast to whatever we have bestowed on you and remember whatever is written in it so that you remain secure from God's wrath. So basically, it is like pointing to the gravity of the covenant that they have made, and they are being told that they are making this covenant in a way that Mount Sinai is suspended over them, and it's like the splendor and the majesty as well as the power of God being displayed to them, that if ever they go back on this promise of not obeying what is contained in the book or in the Torah, if they do so, then the way this Mount Sinai is suspended over them and it can just destroy them anyway. In a similar way, the Almighty has a strong grasp over them, and they must remember that this is something that if they shirk this responsibility, then they are going to face the brunt of it. Now, as you can see, the verse says, "Summa tawallaytum min ba'di zalika falawla fadlullahi alaykum wa rahmatuhu lakuntum min al-khasirin." That once they were reminded of this, they were told that you have to hold fast to what has been written. But instead of following what had been written, the Quran says that they once again shirked the responsibility. And then the Almighty once again forgave them. Summa tawallaytum, and then the Almighty says, "Falawla fadlullahi alaykum wa rahmatuhu lakuntum min al-khasirin." Once again, the mercy of God engulfed them. Once again, they were forgiven. Once again, they were given another chance. And as we will see, that they squandered this chance. And then another thing which is brought up from their history is mentioned in verse 64, and rather in verse 65, and it says that وَلَقَدْ عَلِمْتُمُ الَّذِينَ اعْتَدَوْا مِنْكُمْ فِي السَّبْتِ, which means that the Sabbath, the violation of the Sabbath, which is famously known, was something that they did. Now, the word Sabbath actually means a holiday. It was originally on a Friday, but the Israelites changed it into the day which follows Friday, which is Saturday. So for the Israelites, this day was devoted to worshipping the Almighty generation after generation as a symbol, as a symbolic manifestation of the eternal covenant they had pledged. So it was like a revival of the fact that on every Saturday, it was Friday, of course, but it started off in the true sense that the day of Friday was chosen for this. They changed this to Saturday, and it was a symbolic manifestation that now the covenant that they had pledged, they would follow it. On this day, they were not allowed to do work, go out for hunting or entertainment, and they could not even light their stoves and take their service from their slaves. So this is what happened. They could do nothing of the sort. So the references to people among them, as you can see, there was a city there which had tried to liberate themselves from the restrictions of this day by inventing subterfuges in the garb of the Sharia, and they made fun of it. The purpose is to cite an example of the breaches that the Israelites had committed. So the Israelites were fully aware of this anecdote, and that is why the Quran has actually not mentioned it in detail. And we know that what happened was that in that particular city, they further committed this violation, and the Quran says that it was like a curse to the Israelites. The words are "Kunu qiratan khasiin," that they would become detestable monkeys. Now, it is evident from verses that the way they resembled monkeys was so manifest that the people of the surrounding cities could learn a lesson from them. It was like as if their inner nature had been perverted and converted. And it seems that like monkeys, they broke all limits in following their base desires. First, their character became perverted, and later their appearance also changed. So ultimately, they became cursed monkeys from their inside and their outside. If you look at some of the parallel verses of the Quran, you'll find that in Surah Araf, it is said that this city which is being discussed, in which this incident took place, it was located near a sea and as a divine trial. This is mentioned in Surah Araf. And the fish would come near the coastline on the day of Sabbath in a prominent way. So they would raise their heads and they would present themselves so that they could hunt these fish. And on other days, which were other than the Sabbath, they did not come. So precisely on the day in which they were not allowed to hunt, these fish presented themselves as a trial and test from the Almighty. So the authorities are of the opinion that this location was most probably Ayla, or the city of Eilat or Ilut. It is mentioned variously. And currently we find the country of Israel has made a seaport by this very name. So the Eilat or Elut, if you look up, you'll find that this is a seaport in today's Israel. So the famous seaport of Jordan that we also know is called Aqaba. It also lies near it. And in the times of Prophet Solomon, this was the principal port for his military and trade fleets for the Red Sea. So the Red Sea was that place where his military and trade fleets were located. And the location at the extreme end of the branch of Red Sea, which lies in the form of a gulf between the eastern side of the island of Sinai and the western coast of Arabia. So this is a rough estimation or the location of the city where it was located, and the fish would come on the Sabbath and they presented themselves with their heads raised, and it was as if they were provided with this opportunity. It was a big test for them because they were not allowed to hunt for them on a Saturday. But then they succumbed to this, and they made subterfuges, and they tried to bring the fish on certain spots in which, of course, they would not do so on a Saturday. They would not hunt for them, but they would sort of have them located in side tracks, in some of the canals where they would get caught, and on other days they would try and hunt them out. And so therefore, for the legal part, they would try to obey the Sabbath, but in its spirit, they would not continue with it. So this is one of the history sections of the Israelites that is presented in these verses. And before I go further, if you have any questions on these verses, please present them.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. Annie, you're first in line. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. So what's the evidence of the original Sabbath being on Friday?
This is historically known that it was a Friday, and it was something that we know from the Prophet's narratives as well, in which we are told that it was originally Friday, and they changed it to the following day, and it was there ever since the time of Abraham. Even scholars say that even before him. So the evidence is mostly found in our own hadith books, which tell us that it was a Friday.
But how would tradition know about it if the Old Testament also referred to it as Saturday, which obviously it would?
You see, because of the fact that we know that one day was fixed in the Sharia for sermonizing, for giving people rest, and we do come to know from our own Prophet's history that it was a Friday originally, and one of the things that he was sent was to restore everything in its original place. And so we find the Prophet, if I remember correctly, telling us on one occasion that how he has restored the holiday back to its original day, which is Friday. So it was further, we know that it was further changed by the followers of Jesus to Sunday. So it started off with the Friday in the times of Abraham, and later on it was changed by the Jews to Saturday, and still later on in the times of the followers of Christ to Sunday. So this is a deviation that we can trace from our own history. We don't have, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know if Bible history says anything about it, but my understanding here is based on history which has been provided by our own authorities.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Imran. Imran, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Again, thank you very much for a very nice beginning. Quick question on, the Sabbath question was very nice, very good question. And I want to know about this incident of Bani Israel that them not following spiritually the Sabbath and the restrictions, as you had mentioned, about them just letting the fish come in on Saturdays, and then they would just fish them the rest of the week. And then the punishment of them becoming apes. Of course, what we learn is that there were only a small number of people or community that were made apes. But what I want to know, if there is any mention of that in other books, and did these people, once they died, like they were gone, or the punishment continued, or what became of that? And that's, yes. And then you mentioned about Surah Araf, the ayahs 171 to 1, which I missed that part. How
yes,
many?
171 and 172.
Thank you.
So those are the verses which describe how they violated Sabbath in more detail. And as far as the fact is concerned, whether the turning into apes is mentioned in the Torah, to the best of my knowledge, I don't remember. I maybe need to look it up again, but I think it's not mentioned in the Torah anywhere. What we do know from the Quran is that this was a punishment that was given to them in violation of this day of Sabbath, and it's not only their outer self that became very similar to apes, or they turned into physically in that form, but in their own internal form and structure also resembled these apes. So this is something which is a punishment which the Quran mentions very explicitly. As you can see in the words, we just cannot have another interpretation when it says "Kunu qiradatin khasi'in." It's not just the monkey or the ape which is mentioned here. It says khasi'in, which means that they were detestable in their habits as well. So it's like it's a very, very disparaging and a humiliating expression, and vis-a-vis the punishment that they got as a result.
Okay, and that's specifically for that particular city that you were mentioning?
Yes, of course. Not for all of them. Yeah, the people who violated the Sabbath.
Right. Thank you. And only that generation, once they died, that was it.
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. Jazakumullah.
Many thanks, sir. Next question is from Noshaba. Noshaba, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is, the people who are apes at that time, are they still alive and their generation is continue, or they
we just talked about them. They were just one generation who were punished for this, and they had most probably they passed away in those times. The punishment was given for the perpetrators, the people who continue to violate the Sabbath, and that is all. It's not that they continue to live. This is something which is mentioned for a particular period of history.
Thank you very much. So there's a comment by Annie in the chat. It says that the Babylonian Talmud mentions that God turned them behind the Tower of Babel by turning them into apes, spirits, devils, and demons. So that's her comment.
Yes, actually, we need to look that up, because that's the Babylonian Talmud, which has its own complexities. But for the moment, we need to concentrate more on books which are at least ascribed to God. So, as I said, that I don't think this is mentioned in any of the books of the Bible, the Old Testament. It is mentioned in Bible history. The Talmud does mention it, but the Babylonian Talmud, as I said, has to be looked upon with its own peculiarities as well. So it's not. It is something that has to be looked upon with a pinch of salt.
Just a corollary to this, the idea is that where the Darwin's theory is coming from? Humans evolving from monkeys. What do you have to say?
No, that's an entirely different part that I would say. If you study Darwin, you'll find out that his own evidence is based on his own voyage that he undertook in that famous ship that we all know. And he collected those samples, and those samples they belong mostly to the African continent. So that's an entirely different story. So this is something which is very different.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, maybe I'm confused, but याद पड़ता है कि कुरान पाक में है कि सब्त का दिन सैटरडे के लिए या फ्राइडे के दिन मुस्लिम के लिए है. आप बता रहे हैं कि उन्होंने फ्राइडे को चेंज कर दिया था सैटरडे में. कहाँ मुझे गलती लग रही है?
Right. Actually, the word Sabbath, it means holiday. It doesn't mean Saturday. People think that it's Saturday because Sabbath was transformed into a Saturday, and people have translated Sabbath into a Saturday. The original meaning of Sabbath is chutti, is holiday. So we know from our own Prophet's explanation, he has said that originally the Sabbath was a Friday, the holiday was a Friday. And we know from the Jewish history and from Christian history how they changed this into, they changed into a Saturday, the Jewish people, and the Christians they changed into a Sunday. So, maybe you need to correct your information that originally it was, yes, a Friday. And the Quran hasn't spoken of this at all. It's not found in the Quran anywhere. The meaning of the word Sabbath is not found there. All that the Quran mentions is that this is what they did on the day that they were disallowed to do so. So basically, it's a disallowance that is mentioned by the Quran.
And that's why they were punished.
That is why they were punished.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry. I remember now. You explained that in your first explanation, but I forgot. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Thank you. Jazakallah.
Thank you so much. We have 3 more questions. Riaz, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab.
Wa Islam.
So in the Quran, there are a lot of things when it says it is the tamsili. So, I mean, how we know then the word karada is not used as a tamsil and it is really in its own real meaning? I mean,
You see, the words, they have to stand up to what they convey. If you read the next verse after 65, you see how the Almighty has mentioned it. It says, فَجَعَلْنَاهَا نَكَالًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهَا وَمَا خَلْفَهَا. So, God made that city of theirs an example for those around it and a means of counsel to the God-fearing. I mean, this could not have been a metaphorical thing because God made an example after them. People could see them, how they were punished. And plus, even before that, if you look at how the Quran says, فَقُلْنَا لَهُمْ كُونُوا قِرَةً خَاسِئِينَ, this cannot represent any, metaphorical expression into it. And if anyone does see any metaphorical thing in this verse, the very next verse actually goes against it, because it says that this is how we made an example out of them, and people around that city, they learned a lesson, or they were required to learn a lesson, that how people, when they violate God's commands, they get punished in this way. So I think it's very explicit, not only in the verse itself, but the way it is followed up by the next verse, which tells us that the exemplary way in which they were punished was something that was made a lesson for the people who were onlookers.
So in other words, so that generation was finished. I mean, they are not anymore.
Yeah, yes, that's it. Yeah, the people who were given this order and they violated it, it's but obvious that they would be the ones who were punished for that.
Okay, thank you.
Many thanks. We'll take 2 more questions. Noshad, please go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. As you rightly mentioned, Sabbath means a holiday. And you said that Friday was a holiday and then they changed it to Saturday and Prophet restored it back to Friday. But how could Friday be a holiday? Because doesn't the Quran mention that after your prayers, you can spread out in the land and carry out your businesses, seek God's treasures? And even when you hear the first adhan, you will shut down all your businesses and get back to the mosque. So how could that possibly be a holiday?
So you see, this was something which was of a religious, obligation for religious. It was not an obligation for in other temporal affairs. It was devoted to worship. So the import was that on that holiday, everything that relates to worship should be given importance to. And as far as this question is concerned, the Quran says, فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةُ فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ, which means that once the prayer is finished, you just spread out in the earth and find what God has ordained for you. Again, that is something which is consistent with the notion that it was particularly meant for something holy and something that they would devote themselves to. So وَابْتَغُونَ مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ would again mean that they would find God's blessings and mercy through their own activities, referring to various acts of worship.
So just a question related to that. We say that Islam is a deen which is not that of abstinence or ahbaniyat, and it wants you to stay in the world, but and lead your regular life but follow the guidance from Allah. But spending the whole day basically not doing anything, essentially, that tends to think that this day was reserved for activities that are more of abstinence in nature. Was that a law only for the Bani Israel of that time? Because as per my understanding was that usually Islam does not promote or encourage abstinence or staying away from worldly affairs.
You're absolutely right. So this abstinence was like a test for them. You see, they were required to abstain from all worldly activities, and hunting was one of those worldly activities, and they were actually required to abstain from hunting, from all other sports, anything that would be distracting from the call of God or from the religion of God. This is not the same as other religions were required to do. For example, when it was a Friday and it was restored back to its Friday, for example, people who follow Prophet Muhammad or the Ishmaelites, so this is not something which is ordained for them as well. So this also answers Naushad Saab's question that he just raised, that it is not that you need to apply the same restrictions vis-a-vis Friday. So yabtaghuna min fadlillah, of course, means that it is something that you can find God's blessings by indulging in various activities, not only of worship but also of your own mundane sort. So the fact that that worship day or that day was reserved for worship and no other activity, that was particularly for the Israelites. And so that was like a day that they had to devote. And furthermore, the Quran actually made it a test for them. It was a test case for them that they were required not to do anything else. So this is something which is specific for them. Once the holiday or the rest day was restored to a Friday, I mean, it was just like telling us that, well, it is one day in which you can rest, but it doesn't mean that you cannot carry out any activity which relates to your own livelihood. It's just like saying that, well, this is a day that you can. It's not that you must, that you can take rest and do all your chores. And that is precisely why you see there is a change in the Sharia. Whereas in the Israelites' case, the whole day was reserved for non-worldly activities, and they had to devote themselves to worship. But in the case of the Muslim Ummah or the Ummah of Muhammad, just the Friday prayer, it was reduced. The whole day was reduced to the Friday prayer, in which people were required to, pray in a very specific way in a congregation. So the rest of the day was not of the same sort. You could have indulged in any other activity. So that again is an analogy that we have to understand, that for them it was the whole day, and for the rest of the Ummah, for the Ishmaelites, it had now come to take the shape of a couple of hours in which they had to devote themselves.
Thank you. And sorry to keep going back to that topic, but my understanding was that this 7-day week started, in Constantine's time. And before that, it wasn't even a 7-day week. And Abraham was, at least 1500 years BC, right? So where does this concept of Friday come from?
It comes from, as I said, history. And the fact that Constantine was the first one to institute a 7-day week, I don't think this is correct information. If you look at the book of Genesis, you'll find the creation taking place in a way that it says that the Almighty rested on the 7th day. And some of the earlier traditions, if I remember correctly, Jewish traditions also say so. It's like pre-Abrahamic, or at least at the times of Abraham. And all that I can say is that perhaps it was the same 7-day week which was constituted by Constantine with a different name. So he gave different names to the days in his own times, and this was in consonance with the Gregorian calendar, in which the months were also changed, and the names of the days were also changed, and the days' names were brought in consonance to some of the deities. So Monday was the moon day. It was the day on which the moon deity was worshipped. So what he did, I think, was not that he changed the number of days into a week. He changed the names of the days in a format in which each day would represent some deity. So Sunday was, of course, the day on which the sun was worshipped, and this is something which was the remnant of these pagan practices. So now we go on to the next paragraph of verses. This is going to be until verse 71. So I'm just going to read out the text and translation. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً قَالُوا أَتَتَّخِذُونَ هُزُوًا قال أعوذ بالله من الجاهلين أن أكون من الجاهلين قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا فارض ولا بكر عوان بين ذلك فافعلوا ما تؤمرون قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما لونها قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة صفراء فاقع لونها تسر الناظرين قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي إن البقرة تشابه علينا وإنا إن شاء الله لمهتدون قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا ذلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها قالوا الآن جئت بالحق فذبحوها وما كادوا يفعلون. So this is the famous incident of how the Israelites were commanded to sacrifice a cow, and they started to question Prophet Moses and made themselves, they were cornered, they made themselves into more difficulty with each question, because the cow that was commanded was just a cow and there was no specifics involved. But by those questions that they put forth, they gradually reduced that description to such a narrow one that they hardly could find such a cow. And as you will see, that this was a way in which the Torah tells us that this was what we call the kasama, and a cow would be slaughtered if there would be a murder in a city or a village, and people would slaughter a cow, and then they would dip their hands in the blood of the cow, and they would swear oaths that they are not the ones who are guilty of this murder. So this was a way in which the murderer was found out. So this background has to be known, and this background is furnished from the Torah. So I'm just going to read out the Torah before you, part of that Torah, which will let you know that this cow slaughter incident is not something merely done for the purpose of slaughtering a cow. People don't have this background that this is basically a way which the Israelites did. It's a methodology that they conducted or they followed in order to find out the murderer. Whenever a murder would take place, they would gather in a city, they would slaughter a cow, and then, as I said, they washed their hands in its blood, and they was each one of them would swear an oath that they are not the guilty ones and they have nothing in the murder of that person. So I'm just going to read out the book of Deuteronomy. This is chapter 21 and verses 1 to 7, and you'll find this very clearly written there. So it is said, if a man is found slain, if a man is found murdered or slain in a field in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess, and it is not known who killed him. So you see, it's like to find out how or who the person was who has killed the slain person. So it says that it is not known who killed him. Your elders and judges shall go out and measure the distance from the body to the neighboring towns. So wherever the body is found slaughtered or murdered, they'll just measure that from the towns that are close by that incident. And then what will happen? Then the elders of the town nearest the body shall take a heifer is a cow, that has never been worked and has never worn a yoke, and lead her down to a valley that has not been plowed or planted, and where there is a flowing stream. There in the valley they are to break the heifer's neck. This is a very special expression of the Torah. You'll find break the neck. It's not breaking the neck literally. It actually refers to the fact that it has to be slaughtered. So breaking the neck is a literal translation. What it exactly means is that you have to slaughter it, because you generally do it by the neck. You've slaughtered the cow by the neck. So the translators of the Old Testament have used that word literally as if you are breaking the neck in actual form, whereas of course it's not the case. So just going to read that part again. The elders of the town nearest the body shall take a heifer that has never been worked, and exactly the same what the Quran has said here. It's a heifer which is totally free of any work duties, and it has never worn a yoke. It's not worn a yoke anyway. It is not plowed any land or planted in any way, any contribution in planting or plowing the land. And where there is a flowing stream, there in the valley they are to break the heifer's neck. The priests, the son of Levi, shall step forward, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister and to pronounce blessings in the name of the Lord, and to decide all these cases of dispute and assault. Then all the elders of the town nearest the body shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the valley, and they shall declare, our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. So you see, this is what they will do. They will swear this oath that neither were we responsible of killing this person, nor did we ever see anyone who killed this person. So neither did we perpetrate this crime, nor are we the witnesses to anyone who did so. And as you can see from this, from these 8 verses of chapter 21 of the Old Testament, that basically these verses, they tell us that it would be done regarding the town that was nearest the body or where the body was found slain. So amongst all the villages, because it was more probable, the village that was nearest to the body would have had the person as the person who had killed that body. So they would do this. So exactly this is something which in the Quran has been mentioned in its original form. So the purpose that this cow was asked to be slaughtered is not that they were being tested for any other reason, as is generally understood by so many commentators. The purpose was to find out a murderer in a particular situation, and they were just asked to slaughter a cow. The subsequent questions that you have just seen, as I have narrated, they were all questions which they just said that their own question was made that cow slaughter even more difficult. Every passing question made it even more difficult. So if I just read through the translation once, you will be able to see how it is connected with this passage of the Bible. So it says, "And recall when Moses said to his people, God commands you to slaughter a cow." Now the word is antasbahu baqarah. So I'm not going to go much deeper into the Arabic, but just to give you the small inclination that whenever a noun occurs in an undefined way, like baqarah, it's like an undefined way, it's not al-baqarah, it's baqarah. So it actually means that they were required to slaughter any cow. It's not that any specific cow was connoted here, but their own questions narrowed it down to a certain cow. So this is what they did in order to make it difficult for their own selves. So it says that they replied, "Are you joking with us?" This is atattakhizuna huzuwa. What they said was, well, what in the name of God or what in the world are you asking? It's like a sarcasm which was presented to them, that why should we slaughter a cow for this purpose? Are you joking? How can we? If a murder has taken place, what is the need for slaughtering a cow? We should go and find out the murderers through other means. So he says, "I seek refuge with God from becoming such a reckless person." So Moses has replied that, well, if he is asking, or God has asked me to tell you that you have to slaughter a cow, it's not out of any other reason. I'm not joking with you. I'm pretty serious. So then they said, "Call then on your Lord for us, that he make known to us what should the cow be like." Moses replied, "Your Lord says the cow should neither be an old one nor a young one. It should be in between these. Go now and do as you are being bidden." So now the first question, of course, was the age of the cow. And the Almighty never specified the age, but it was their question that made them look for a cow that was neither old nor young, but of medium age, as the Quranic words are, awanum bayna zalika. Somewhere between that old age and young age, find a cow which is not of not that age. And they said, "Call on your Lord for us, so that he also clarify to us what her color should be." So you see, once again, another question that has come to their mind, that what should be the color? The Almighty never told them that they should look for a particular color. But now that they ask this, which color they should be, so now with each question, as you can see, they are making life tough for their own selves as to find the type of the cow which the Almighty has specified. So Moses replied that your Lord says, that cow should be golden, bright in color, such that it is pleasing to those who see. So now once again you have to look for a golden cow, and that's not, of course, easy to find. And they replied once again, "Go once again, and we are in some confusion regarding the cows, and if God wills, we shall now definitely be rightly guided." So they could still not contain themselves. They could not hold themselves back. And they now asked a third question. And what was that? That please specify something more about that cow, because we are now confused about its matter. Now the Almighty has made it even more tough on them. So he says, he said that your Lord says it should not be a working cow, so that it plows the earth and waters the crops. It should be of one color. No other color should be mixed in it. So you see, now a further step has been taken, that there should be no spots. It should have the same color. It should be have a uniform color, which is, of course, extremely difficult to find, that you don't have spots in the skin of a cow. And then it should not be a working cow. Remember, most cows in the Israelites, if you study their history, they were all meant for work. They were all used for plowing. Seldom was a cow set aside for any other purpose. So you see, every question has made it difficult for them to find such a cow. And precisely That is why we find the Quran says, فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ, that in this way they slaughtered that cow and it did not look that they would do so. I mean, with all these questions that they had just made themselves, they were so difficult to answer that as far as the cow itself was concerned, that they did not know what would happen. And so as far as the next part of the Quranic verse is concerned, I'm just also going to read this next paragraph because it's somewhat related in a particular way, and then we can have questions on this part. So it says, وَإِذْ قَتَلْتُمْ نَفْسًا فَادَّارَأْتُمْ فِيهَا وَاللَّهُ مُخْرِجٌ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ فَقُلْ نَضْرِبُوهُ بِبَعْضِهَا كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَى وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. And recall also the incident when you slew a man, then you swore false oaths and started to blame one another for it, and God decided to reveal what you were concealing. Thus we said, strike this corpse with a piece of that cow which has been slaughtered for swearing oaths on it. So he came to life. So that man came to life. This was like a miracle. And precisely in this manner, God will restore the dead to life, and He shows you His signs that you may understand. So you see, this is now another incident. We had that cow slaughter incident in particular to find out the person who had murdered that slain person, and they started to question regarding the cow that was to be slaughtered, and the Quran is marked that they did not. I mean, it was ultimately they had to slaughter it. Although they wanted to defer it or to just not conduct it the way the Almighty had wanted them to do so, and they tried to just dilly-dally. And then another incident is narrated from their history, and it says that it does seem that if you look at these words, فَقُلْ نَضْرِبُوهُ بِبَعْضِهَا, that it is evident from the way that the pronoun ha has been used in this expression that this instance also in accordance with the law of Qasama. The law of Qasama is the same law which we just discussed regarding the cow slaughter earlier on, that it was called Qasama, this way in which you slaughter a cow and you ask people to swear qasams or oaths. This whole process is called the Qasama or the law of Qasama. So it could be that in accordance with the law of Qasama, and once again they are commanded to do so. They want to sacrifice, they must sacrifice a cow, and once again conduct the proceedings of Qasama in order to find out who the murderer was. But it seems from the text of the Quran that, as it says, Wallahu mukhrijum ma kuntum taktumun, that they wanted to hide the slain person, the person who had slain, who was responsible for slaying. And for this, in all probability, they started to swear false oaths. And in order to admonish them, the Almighty actually showed this miracle. And the miracle was that they were told that they strike that murdered person with a part of that cow's meat, and it seems that he came back to life, as the Quran says, كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَى. In this way, God restores the dead to life, and He shows you His signs so that you may understand. So again, it seems that he came back to life and he pointed out towards his murderer himself. So again, this is a breach of their own covenant which they have made, and these two incidents once again shed light. The first one shedding light on the fact that how they make things difficult on their own selves by asking too many questions. And the second incident actually shows that how they wanted to hide the murderer and how the Almighty once again exposed who the person was. So before I go to the next few verses, if you have any questions regarding the sections the verses that we have studied, these are verses 67 to 73. If you have any questions regarding these verses, please raise them.
Dr. Javed, Doctor, my question is that it means these are two different incidents in which God is testing them. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
they are by
That's correct.
somehow they are got intervened by the end of the results, that the God used the same cow to test them again.
Right. Yes, not the same cow. The cow is different, but the method is the same. I mean, that was a separate incident. This is a separate incident. The one cow was slaughtered for that purpose, which was initially done for the purpose that you can see. Now, this is a separate incident. So these are two separate incidents.
Because see, they are just came right after the another. They are just continuity in the
Right.
Quran. That's why it look like that it's the
But
same cow which is
you
God used.
but you need to note that what is when it says what is, it means that now a new thing is now being presented to them. So it says that recall that is incident also. You see, it's not that it has not come with that pointer that now something new is being brought up.
Yeah. It means the people of Israel, they don't know the rule of the regulation of the Qasama before that.
No. They knew it very well. You see, they knew it very well, but purposefully they started to swear false oaths. You see, the Quran says that they tried to hide the murderer, and the Almighty was bent upon exposing him. But because all of them they swore false oaths en masse, all of them. So what the Almighty did was He showed them a miracle. He said that, okay, you strike that murdered person with a part of the meat of that slaughtered cow, and once they did so, that dead corpse, it was brought back to life. It gained life once again, and therefore it pointed out, I mean, the person who was murdered, he came back to life, and he said, well, this is the person who murdered me. He pointed out who the murderer was. And that is why the Quran says, كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَى. It is thus that the Almighty gives life to the dead. It's precisely for this reason. So this is a separate incident in which it is being told that you have misused the Qasama, you have violated the norms of the Qasama incident, and because you have been swearing false oaths, now God has once again showed you this miracle that a dead corpse has been brought to life, because there was no other means to find out the murderer. I mean, the means was that one of them was, of course, lying, because all of them were there, but all of them decided that they'll swear false oaths so that the murderer is not exposed. So they were misusing this incident of this methodology of Qasama. Go ahead.
The question is,
Go ahead.
what kind of a joke is the word al-jahilin referring to? Joke made about the orders of Almighty to mock at them, or the joke containing lies in it?
No. The joke being that you slaughter a cow. So, I mean, Inna Allaha ya'murukum an tasbahu Baqarah, that God is asking them to slaughter a cow. So this they thought was, I mean, why would God ask them to slaughter a cow? This is something that they usually would do. So slaughtering cows or goats or camels was something which the Israelites would normally do to consume their meat. So when Moses came to them and said, well, God is now asking you to slaughter a specific cow. Obviously, he must have told them this background, that the purpose of slaughtering this cow was not to consume its meat, but to find out who the person who was murdered, that person was, whose identity was. So they said, well, what kind of a method is this? Are you joking with us that we should find out the murderer by killing a cow or slaughtering a cow? What exactly do you mean by that? So this comment is on the slaughter itself. Why should God ask them to slaughter a cow to find out the the person who's murdered that person?
Many thanks for a beautiful answer, sir. Next question is from Ati. Please go ahead.
So just wanted to clarify what you just discussed. So what you're saying is that this joke that they were trying to refer to was the law of Qasama, and what it means is that next time, every time they wanted to find a murderer out using this method, they were required to sacrifice a bright yellow cow, which has not been used for other course. So it was not one-off incidents. It was actually the law of Qasama that they were told. And due to
No, it was not a one-off incident.
Okay. And the second part is that one-off incidents that is being referred to. These one-off incidents that is being referred
Yes, that is one of the incidents. So you see, these are two separate incidents. So one is the institution of the law itself. The first is how the law itself was brought into practice. And the second one is one of its applications.
Right, because the reason why I was asking the question was because when it says Fakul Nazri Buhu Bibaziha, Bibaziha still refers to that cow, but you're saying no, it was not the same cow.
Yeah.
It is.
So yeah, you see, this is a very good that you pointed this out. This is a very specific style of the Arabic language, and if you look up Ustaz Islahi or Ghamidi Sahab under these verses, they'll tell you that pronouns do come in this way. the ha pronoun has been used in this expression that in this instance it is also in accordance with the law of Qasama. So fakul nadribuhu bibadiha would means part of that slaughtered cow, or the meat of that slaughtered cow should be used to strike that corpse. So the pronoun used ha is of course referring to the cow or the baqarah meant in the previous incident. And this is a very common style of the Quran in which two separate incidents are mentioned, but the pronoun is used in a way that it is referring to the previous incident, as if that was an incident in which the whole situation became one. Whereas in fact what is implied is that something similar was done. So this ha is actually referring to the baqarah that was slaughtered on that second occasion, and this is a very, very special style of the Quran actually.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
Are we correct to understand that the kind of cow they worship was always a solid one color cow, and I don't know about this particular color, but was solid color, like, because if it was law, so it had to be that kind of.
It was uniform. The cow was uniform. I mean, it must have the same color throughout. It should be spotless.
So that kind of cow they always worshiping. I'm asking again because you got cut out with the internet.
Yes, actually, my understanding is that for the future occasions, it was not that they needed to find the same cow again and again. It was this first incident in which the particular cow was slaughtered in the way they were being told. Otherwise, for future incidents, any cow was sufficient for slaughter. I mean, they need not go for the same cow. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you much. Jazakallah.
Many thanks. Next question is from Adila, and then we'll go back to our topics. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Adila.
Alaikum salam. Thank you, Yasin sir. So is there a possibility that this is one incident? That I know we study that there are two separate incidences, the cow incidences. One is for the Qasama, the honor of Qasama, and one is the separate incident. But can it be one incident? Is there a possibility? Because some scholars have taken it as.
Yes, some scholars do take it as a single incident, but it is very unlikely, specifically when the words begin with وَإِذْ قَتَلْتُمْ. You see, this should not have come. The word وَإِذْ, whenever it starts off with the وَإِذْ, it says, and recall what had happened. And on most occasions when it is said and recall what happened, the way it has been mentioned here, it refers to a new incident. Had it been the same incident, the word should have been something different. I mean, instead of saying وَإِذْ قَتَلْتُمْ, it should have been, well, this is how the law was instituted, and now that this law has been instituted, you were asked to do something in accordance with that law. So words should have been something to the effect as if they were continuous with the previous incident. However, here we find the Quran telling us that how the law was instituted, and once that was done, look what the Quran says, and recall what happened. So you see, when you say these words, when you institute a law, and then when you say recall, I mean, this would not collocate. It would always refer to the fact that now something new is being referred to, and it is basically an application of that law that you need to now understand. So that is why my understanding, and of course the understanding of Ustaz Amin Hassan Islahi and Ustaz Ghamidi, is that they are two different incidents.
So the word is for recall.
Yeah, what is yeah, that is a very clear sign that they are different incidents.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. It's back to you.
So, okay, now let us read the remaining verses, starting off with verse 73 or 74 as it. So it says, ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَّقَّقُ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَهْبِطُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. You persisted in this attitude. Which attitude is this referring to? This attitude of breaking your covenants and finding out subterfuges in carrying out the commands of God. You persisted in this attitude. After this, your hearts again became hard, as if they were rocks or even harder. And among rocks, there are also some from which rivulets flow, And among them are also some which break asunder, and water gushes from them. And there are also some among them that tumble down for the fear of God. It is a fact that you have been persisting in this attitude, and God is not unaware of whatever you do. So you see how this address shifts here from the Jews to the Muslims. So now it says, Summa qasad qulubukum. And this is a very, very important part of the Quran that we have to understand. If you recall that very earlier on, we had found this shift in address from the Jews to the idolaters of Medina once again. And they were being told that, look here, now you should worship God, and the way you worship God is not the way that He should be worshipped, and you associate partners with Him. So if you recall that part of the Quran that we have already studied, you'll see how the address is shifted once again here. So you see their charge sheet was something that was what was being presented, and now suddenly it is said, Summa qasat qulubukum min ba'di zalika fahiya kal hijara, and the rest you can see that we have just read out as a translation. And then it says, أَفَتَتْبَعُونَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا لَكُمْ وَقَدْ كَانَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ يُحَرِّفُونَهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا أَقَلُوهُ وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا وَإِذَا خَلَا بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ قَالُوا أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ لِيُحَاجُّوكُمْ بِهِ عِندَ رَبِّكُمْ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ أَوَلَا يَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا يُسِرُّونَ وَمَا يُعْلِنُونَ. Believers, in spite of this, do not expect from them that they will accept what you say. And these are the people, a group of which has been listening to the word of God, and their understanding, and after understanding it fully, has been altering it deliberately. And these are people that when they meet the believers, they declare, we believe. And when they are alone with one another, they say, do you inform them what God has revealed to you, so that they may dispute with you on its basis in your Lord's presence? Then do you not understand? Do they not know that God has knowledge of all that they conceal and all that they reveal? And just let me finish this verse. وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْكِتَابَ إِلَّا أَمَانِي وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. So, and these people are the ones that there are also among them the illiterate commoners who consider the book of God to be only a collection of their fancies and act only on their conjecture. فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ. So devastation is for those who write the Sharia with their own hands and then declare this is from God, in order to gain a paltry price through it. ثُمَّ يَقُولُونَ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ لِيَشْتَرُوا بِهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. And then it goes on to say, فَوَيْلٌ لَهُمْ مِمَّا كَتَبَتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَوَيْلٌ لَهُمْ مِمَّا يَكْسِبُونَ. So devastation is for them because of what their hands have written, and devastation is for them because of what they have earned through it. And these are the people that they have claimed. And what is that claim? وَقَالُوا لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودًا قُلْ أَتَّخَذْتُمْ عِندَ اللَّهِ عَهْدًا فَلَنْ يُخْلِفَ اللَّهُ عَهْدَهُ أَمْ تَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. So this is one of their fancies. You remember, as the Quran says, that they would think that this book is a collection of their own fancies and their own whims and desires. And you find an example of this. And the example is that the fire of hell shall never touch us. Indeed, an agony of a few days may, however, be inflicted. Ask them, have you taken a promise from God? For if you have taken a promise, God shall not break His promise whatsoever. Or do you fabricate against God what you have no knowledge of? So this is what they have been saying. And then it says, بَلَا مَنْ كَسَبَ سَيِّئَةً وَأَحَاطَتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. Yes, why not? Those who have committed a vice and their sin has totally encompassed them, it is they who are the companions of hell. In it they shall remain forever. And those who accepted faith and did righteous deeds, it is they who are the companions of paradise. They shall abide in it forever. So, as you can see, I just started off explaining to you, and let me correct myself here. It's not from verse 74 that the address shifted. It is basically from verse 75. As you can clearly see, أَفَتَطْمَعُونَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا لَكُمْ. It is here that the address shifts to Muslims. So previously the Jews were addressed, but from verse 75 onwards, now the Muslims are being told, and they are being informed of certain things. And one reason for this address, or for this shift, is that Muslims, they are assured that they should not lose heart while facing the hostility of the Jews, and also to inform them of some clandestine activities of the Jews, so that the simpletons among the Muslims are not defrauded by being influenced from the claims to faith made by the Jews. So remember, they would say that we have professed faith. And we have already seen earlier on in Surah Baqarah that when they would say that we have professed faith, what would they say? What they mean? They would mean that we have professed faith in God and the hereafter. And then when they would be subjected to scrutiny or called to account, they would say, well, yes, we believe in Prophet Muhammad, but not as a prophet to us, but as a prophet for the Ishmaelites. So this is how they would try to make sense of some of the things that they would say and justify them. It is precisely this what is being referred to here. Now, one important thing that we need to understand here is something which is mentioned here as tahrif, and you can see that one of the things that is tahrif, which means that they have changed the Quran, or they have altered the words of the Quran. And it is here that I'd like to point out some of the things that they did in order to change something by their own words. You can see it says, فَوَيْلُ الَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ. They would write the book from their own selves. They would say that this is from God, whereas this would not be from God. And precisely here that we need to understand that what exactly is this tahrif, or altering the words which the Quran has referred to, not only here but on some other instances as well. So to deliberately interpret something in a manner that is totally opposite to the intention of the author, that is also called tahrif. And if you recall that in one of our previous sessions I had pointed out that one of the ways in which they would distort the Quran or conduct tahrif in it would be that they would change the pronunciation of the word. So remember, the Quran speaks of marwa. They would have changed, or we know in the current Old Testament, they have changed this to the pronunciation to maruwa or to mura or to muria. All these pronunciations, they are there. And then one of the other connotations of the tahrif is that they would add or delete a sentence or discourse in the manner that completely distorts the original meaning. For example, the Jews altered the incident of the migration of Prophet Abraham in a manner that no one could prove that Abraham had any relationship with the Kaaba. So if you look at the Old Testament, you'll find out, all places which belong to the Arabian Peninsula, you'll find that they have posited all these places in the land of Palestine, so that the coming of the last prophet in the progeny of Ishmael and of course Abraham himself could not be spotted in any way. So this is one thing that they did in tahrif, and which is very prominent, and I think I've already pointed it out earlier. One other thing that they would do in this tahrif was that they would translate a word which was a double meaning word. And I think this example I also gave you earlier, that in Hebrew, the word ibn has been translated, it has two meanings, a son and a slave. So when it was said Ibnullah in Hebrew, it did not mean the son of God. It meant the servant of God, which is Abdullah. So the Quran, the Old Testament actually spoke of Ibnullah not as being someone's son of son in the literal sense, but as a servant. So Ibnullah would be exactly the same as Abdullah. And then there were some other things as well. For example, they would raise questions about something that is absolutely clear in order to create uncertainty in the minds of people. And this is how they would do so. And you can see that some of the things that we can clearly point out is that their fancies and their own desires were made to suit their own purpose. The word ummiyun, which is the plural of ummi, as you can see from the verses that we have just said, وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْكِتَابِ. So the word ummiyun is the plural of ummi, and the word ummi means illiterate. And you can clearly see that the way it has been mentioned in this verse is that it shows that the people who were guilty of alteration were actually the literate or the scholars. So you see, this clearly tells us that this alteration was not done by the common man. They were not guilty of it because they were illiterate. So it says, وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْكِتَابَ إِلَّا أَمَانِي. And these fancies, as I said, is an example of how they would require, they would think that, well, the fire would just touch them, if at all, for a few days, and they would be totally saved or delivered from this fire. So this is some of the things that they would do. So all in all, you can see that how this address is now shifted to the Muslims, and they are being told that you think that they're going to believe in you and the Prophet that has brought this message. Look at what they have been doing. And they are people who are fariqum minhum yasma'una kalam Allah. They listen to God's words, summa yuharrifunahu, and then they change it. They do tahrif in it. They alter it. So some of the forms of tahrif which I just pointed out before you are the ones that are very common. They would change the pronunciation. They would change the location of the sites that are mentioned. They distorted the coming of Abraham to the land of Arabia, and they made it look like as if he never made it to Arabia, and he went directly from Iraq to Palestine, so that predictions of the Bible regarding the arrival of the last prophet cannot be related to the land of Arabia. So this is how some of the tahrif that the Quran points out here was done by them. So I'm going to end my today's lesson here, and the question that you might have regarding the last 2 or 3 paragraphs that we have studied, please present them now.
Thank you very much, my dear teacher. This was a beautiful session today. And our first question is from Naushad. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir, one clarification. You said that ummi means illiterate. Isn't there another meaning to relating, saying that those without a book, that is what the Ishmaelites were probably called.
Right.
Am I correct in thinking that way?
Right. You are correct. So that meaning, this word in that meaning is used elsewhere in the Quran. So they would regard the Bani Ismail as the Ummiyeen. So if you read Surah Jummah, it says, it says that Huwallazi ba'asa fil ummiyeen rasulam minhum. So it is God who has sent forth a messenger from amongst the Ummiyeen. And these Ummiyeen were the Banu Ismail, and they were called Ummiyun because of the fact that they had not been aware of any book of God ever since the time of Ishmael. So that is why they were called Al-Ummi. But here the word Ummi it actually refers to the commoners who were illiterate. So it has both these meanings, but in this particular sentence or this particular verse, it is being used as a person who is ignorant of reading and writing. But the meaning that you are referring to is one that has reference in the Quran in other places, and there it refers to the Banu Ismail or the Ishmaelites because they were not conversant with any book of God.
Exactly, sir. That's the clarification I needed. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Noguer, you are next. Please go ahead.
Doctor, my question regarding like the same Ummiyeen. These are referring to Bani Ismail, that they don't have any prophet in the progeny of Ismail from up to Muhammad. Is that right? That's why they are Ummiyeen.
Right. So as I said, that is another, the word ummi means illiterate. And literally it means a person who is not conversant with reading and writing. This is its literal meaning. But then for the Banu Ismail, it became a title. Because of the fact that they were not conversant with any book of God. So it developed in meaning, and it came to be known as people who, it's not just simply they don't know how to read and write, but people who are not aware of divine guidance, who have not been given divine books. So it became a title for them. And this is how the word developed into a new meaning, and it became a title for the Banu Ismail. But here it is not used for the Banu Ismail. It is being used for the commoners. As you can see, that their scholars, they would change the book. They would do tahrif, as the Quran says. But the commoners would not be the one who would be responsible for this tahrif. And all they would do is that they were not literate, and whatever the scholars would tell them, they would just believe in them.